Welcome, everyone. This is the budget hearing for Department of Permanence Licenses and Inspections for November 18th, 2021. We're going to go over the 2022 City of Pittsburgh budget. We will cover the capital and operating within the department. I am joined today by our council president, Teresa Cal-Smith, and we're also joined by councilperson Erica Strasburger. I also have with me Mike Strelick, our budget director, assistant director. Yeah, budget guy. So I think typically we start out with an overview. So Mike, if you could go through that with us, that'd be great.
Today's PLI. It's the mission of the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections to improve the safety and quality of life for residents of the city of Pittsburgh through the administration, enforcement of the building code, zoning code, the regulation of contractor and trade licenses, and various business licenses as prescribed by the city code. PLI has three divisions: constructions, operations, and licensing and administration. As of the third quarter report, PLI had 76 of their 87 positions filled. For the 2022 budget, it's proposed that they have a total budget of $7,256,650. That's an increase of 15%. They're proposed to have 90 full-time positions next year. That's an increase of 3. The 3 are all stormwater construction inspector positions. The only other change of note, slight increase for some of the assistant directors. Their non-salary accounts also changed, increased by about 30%, including professional services going up by $63,000. That's outside consulting on erosion and sediment control enforcement, probably related to the 3 new positions. Tuition reimbursement has gone back up as people are going back to school, as was workforce training by $5,000. Computer maintenance also increased by about $5,000 for a new ownership search tool software, which I'm sure would be useful. They have $4.5 million in the capital budget for remediation of condemned building. I try to compare the 2022 budget to the prior year budget. The $4.5 million is both more and less than last year's budget. It was more than the January budget, but less than the August budget that included the federal ARP dollars. PLI has a handful of trust funds. The demo trust fund is down to about $61,000. Their records storage, technology, and operations trust fund is about $238,000 in it. The code trust fund has $47,000, and the OneStop permitting technology trust fund was just approved by council a month ago, so has no activity yet. In addition to the expenses budgeted for 2022, the Department of Permits and Licenses also has a lot of revenue related to permits and licenses. I think almost 70 permits and licenses they'll plan to collect next year based on the fee book that was introduced last week. And we anticipate collecting $8.7 million from those various permits, licenses, and fees. If we could turn it over to the director, I believe she has a presentation for council.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Strelick. So, Director Kinter, thanks for everything you do. I'll allow whatever, not sure if you have a presentation, but any corrections, additions, comments. I always like the slide of how many permits have been issued and how many have been closed, and I really like that slide. So if there's not a slide for it, I like the number.
Thank you, Councilman. I do have a presentation, if I may, for council share our work in the last year and what's to come in 2022.
Oh, Director, I just wanted to make one note. We were joined by Councilman Coghill, so thanks for joining us.
Hi, Councilman. All right, so hopefully I am sharing, see a PowerPoint. All right, excellent. Thank you, members of council, for your time today and for this opportunity to provide an overview of the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections work in 2021 and what to expect in 2022. Thank you, Mr. Strelick, for the overview. I have no corrections. The city's budget supports the critical work of PLI to improve the quality and ensure the safety of the built environment in our city. For the public that may be watching at home, I like to take any opportunity that I have to talk about what PLI does and what your tax dollars pay for when they go to PLI. This next organizational chart, it gives you a sense of scale of the department, and I think it's helpful in understanding the division of duties in the department as well. PLI is responsible for the administration and enforcement of the building codes, property maintenance code, and select licensing codes adopted in the city. We have 87 positions in PLI, all of which support our mission. There are two things I like to stress about PLI. One, that there's a tremendous volume of work. So we've focused on adopting operations that can meet that volume with success in the last few years. And two, that our staff has a very high degree of technical expertise to appropriately administer and enforce the codes. Nearly every PLI employee that you see here in the chart has passed examinations to onboard, and we're obligated to obtain continuing education to maintain those certifications and our expertise. So a quick review, starting on the left in the orange and the red is our operations division, which focuses on code enforcement. Those include operations inspectors who pass the property maintenance code exam and inspect for property maintenance and zoning compliance, and select business license compliance called out in the code. In the red is our fire and life safety inspectors who obtain the International Fire Code and National Fire Protection Agency certifications to inspect high occupancy structures and ensure that the annual and quarterly maintenance and testing requirements of fire and life safety systems are met. This unit also includes our vacant property inspectors who respond to condemnable, vacant, and abandoned building complaints. Vacant property inspectors work to continuously monitor condemned buildings in the city and help identify structures eligible for city-funded demolitions. PLI is responsible for demolishing eminently dangerous and unsafe structures in the city as a matter of public safety. Moving into the middle in the blue section is our licensing and administration unit, which really supports the full department. Our clerical staff work to send out requests for compliance letters to ensure proper noticing of code violations in the city. They maintain our departmental records. They respond to hundreds of right to know requests and handle court scheduling for the department. This unit also includes application technicians who serve as the public's first point of contact in customer service for PLI. They intake all city planning and PLI applications and assess whether or not they belong in a review queue. They pass a permit technician exam to onboard. We also have a smattering of non-union roles in this division that help support our technology efforts and systems, our ongoing record retention projects, revenue collection, personnel equipment needs, continuing education management, etc. This unit has been key in helping the department digitize our legacy documents so that we can truly be a paperless department. In the last 2.5 years, our office has worked to digitize over 1.5 million historic records from microfiche, microfilm, and paper, and reduce our physical space footprint needs, meet requirements to maintain construction and permitting documentation for the life of a building, and work towards making historic information more accessible to the public where permissible. So a lot of heroic work from that unit. Then moving over to the green is our construction division. This includes our plans examination team made up of architects and engineers that ensure that the life safety compliance requirements are met under the construction code. They pass a minimum of 12 exams to onboard to their job pertaining to building, energy, fire, electrical, accessibility, and mechanical code requirements. Plans examiners also serve as our on-call staff after office hours. So when there's a 911 call for a structural issue, they serve on rotation to respond. That could be for a fire, car running into a building, crumbling and dangerous facade, or a landslide involving a structure. In the yellow and green, in the green unit are the construction inspectors, and they are a very, very busy bunch of folks that attend job sites and ensure that work is occurring safely, to code, and to the approved permits and drawings. This unit is expected to see an increase of 3 stormwater inspectors under the current 2022 budget proposal to support the adoption of the updated Title 13 stormwater code passed by City Council this last fall. Those positions will help PLI fulfill its role in that code to ensure the safe installation and compliance of stormwater systems on private parcels. So this chart is what the budget supports. I like to give a sense of volume of the public services provided by the divisions that we just looked at, starting with the operations or code enforcement side. Again, these are the inspectors that enforce the property maintenance, zoning, fire and life safety maintenance, and business licensing codes. And we received last year just over 15,000 complaints through 311 and self-initiated 4,000 cases of issues that we found while we were out in the field conducting business. In a year's time, this unit has completed over 35,000 inspections related to those complaints. This is, of course, a bit of a decrease from last year for a variety of reasons. One, we had 2 fewer inspectors in this division until we received ARP relief this summer. But also the decrease can be attributed to, in part, operational efficiency that we've worked on in the last year. In our old code enforcement system, each new complaint would have its own case file to close out, even if it was duplicative of another investigation that was already occurring. This would lead to confusion from the public and for staff. Now we link like complaints that are about the same matter to one case file that's open and actively being investigated, so that everyone receives the same information and the record is clear. And this decreased the requirement to have these duplicative or unnecessary case files. When our code enforcement team receives a complaint and conducts an inspection, 83% of the time a violation is issued. And one important feature of the OneStop PGH system and our new code enforcement system has been reporting inspection outcomes and reflecting those in our public portal, Civic Central, and through 311. Now the public can know whether an inspector issued a violation or not and why. Of those inspections that do result in a violation, 65% of the time the violations are corrected and abated before we get to court. Another feature of the updated code enforcement system in the last year is recording court outcomes. We're still digging into this data to track dispositions on whether cases were closed as guilty, not guilty, dismissed. Because courts were closed from November 2020 through April 2021, thereabouts, the data is not a great indicator of trends just yet, so we're looking forward to a year of data with the courts open since May. We are keeping an eye out on dismissed case outcomes as well. Usually this means that the court and PLI could not track down a responsible agent to abate the violations on the property. And our data shows that these dead end cases by far take up most of PLI's time and are nuisance properties that neighbors complain about. In the last year, we've begun addressing these properties through a programmatic inspection process. The goal is to track dead end properties in a separate listing, which we now do, and annually research them for a responsible agent and proactively inspect to send these structures to DPW for board up or for clean and lean before the complaints come in. And we've begun doing that. Mr. Strelick had mentioned a tool that was added about $5,000. That tool is a owner search tool that we use as part of this dead end property searching process that we've adopted. And we use programmatic inspections to list and continuously inspect our high occupancy buildings for fire and life safety requirements, condemned structures, and this dead end property list. Different neighborhoods have different code enforcement compliance challenges. When you take away weeds and debris complaints, you can see here that different built environments compliance needs are different, right, in different neighborhoods. In the red, we see building maintenance complaints primarily. In the blue, we see mostly building without. In the green, we see the most vacant property complaints, and these can serve as indicators of the health of the built environment. There are over 1,900 condemned properties in the city of Pittsburgh, and the different needs of neighborhoods are reinforced when we look at condemned properties. There are several factors that can result in condemnation of a property, meaning that the structure is unfit for human occupancy, and that could range from a catastrophic fire to the lack of water service. So given the volume of condemned properties and condemned structures and the need for demolition of unsafe structures and our limited resources, we adopted a scoring tool to help determine what gets demolished. And in the last year, our small but very mighty vacant property team have scored over 1,700 condemned buildings. We're working to expose this data in a more user-friendly way in our Building Eye Civic Central platform. This spring 2022, we will also be including more robust information on city-funded demolitions. We also recognize that there are more factors in addition to the structural health of a building that should be taken into account. So we did work this last year with the Department of City Planning to launch a condemned property feedback tool on Engage PGH. And over the summer, we began gathering comments from the public. We look at this feedback quarterly regarding nuisance activity and incorporate that into our demolition spending plans. We also worked with DCP to take into account the architectural or historic significance of structures that are condemned in hopes that we can work with partners to put those structures back into productive use and get them off the condemnation list. We've also looked at ways to perform the highest quality demolitions by pursuing a deconstruction demolition approach to save elements of structures for reuse and lessen our environmental impact. With council's help, we're engaging in a pilot program with Construction Junction, and we'll begin deconstruction demolitions of eligible city-owned properties this spring 2022. So given our high volume of work across all divisions, PLI has a strong focus on operational and technology improvements. Our technology improvements into the OneStop PGH platform have allowed PLI to adopt consistent and transparent workflows in our permitting, licensing, and code enforcement operations. And as you know, OneStop PGH is our one-stop shop for all development applications in the city, including PLI, the Department of City Planning, the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, and the Fire Bureau. As of May 2020, all PLI employees are now working in the same system. We can all see our departmental operations in one system. OneStop PGH is also very much a work in progress. We got through the launch of each module and we have a working system. But we also this year created a roadmap of enhancements and upgrades to roll out for staff and customers as we continue to work to streamline the development process internally and with our sister agencies. The goal is continual improvement. With council's help, we did pass a dedicated trust fund to support the continual growth of the system in the future. We've had a lot of customers who are super users of the system and some customers that might use the system once and then move on. And we've have a lot of requests for features that would make customers' lives easier and more streamlined when they interface with the system. All right, so it's important to give a sense of scale of PLI's permit volume. Our application technicians, those staff that are on the front line of customer service, performed almost 50,000 application actions in the last year on behalf of PLI and city planning, and they've taken thousands of calls and chats annually. In raw numbers that we can capture when we look at number of plan reviews, number of inspections, phone calls coming in, number of chats, PLI staff has tens of thousands of customer and citizen interactions annually. And those are just the interactions that we can account for numerically using the OneStop PGH system or systems that we have access to. That doesn't account for additional conversations at the job site, a quick phone call, email correspondence, which we know we have in large volumes. All that to say, every member of PLI has direct interface with the public and a lot of it. In our plan review unit, yet again, we see improvements to our construction plan review times for the 4th year in a row. Again, plan review is the part of the permitting process where our in-house architects and engineers review drawings to make sure they conform with construction code standards. The volume of review has remained relatively stable annually over the years, hovering at about 9,000 to 10,000 reviews. We've committed to service level agreements with our customers so that they can depend on a complete review consistently every time. For commercial projects, we have a 30-day review. For residential projects, we have a 50-day review. And by and large, we provide an initial response about 2 working weeks faster than our service level agreement. And we meet our review times 99.9% of the time. Our goal in plan review is to be transparent about what we're reviewing for. On that front, the plan review team has worked this last year to publish our plan review checklist for the public. These are the list of requirements that our internal staff use to review for code compliance, and they're available on our website right now. Design professionals can use these lists to make sure that their submissions contain those elements with the goal of getting through the plan review process in just 1 review. That's a win for us, and it's a win for the customer too. In the construction inspection world, in a year timeframe, our inspectors have completed over 34,000 inspections, which is a 15% increase from last year in the same time period. In addition to scheduled inspections for our customers, our construction inspectors perform enforcement inspections to issue citations related to construction violations. So that would include working without a permit or working outside the scope of the permit, et cetera. Inspectors are making sure that whatever the department approved in the plan review and what the code requires is what's happening out in the field during construction. And by and large, we see compliance. We see about an 89% passing rate of our inspections in the last year. And that increase is about a 9% increase from the prior year. One highlight of the OneStop PGH system is that permit holders receive an inspection report after every inspection that includes a checklist of what PLI inspected for and the pass or fail determination of each item. Again, we want to be transparent about what we're looking for in the field, and that transparency appears to be paying off because we have a higher passing rate of inspections for our customers and better efficiency for PLI to go out and complete an inspection so we can move on to the next one. Related to the permitting process, PLI also runs a licensing program to ensure that permits are obtained by contractors and trade license holders who are qualified and are connected to businesses that pay their taxes and have proper insurances to do work in the city of Pittsburgh. And we see a steady population of about 900 general contractors licensed in the city and a number of trade license holders each year that has remained fairly consistent. So bigger picture, PLI has annually issued 10,000 permits thereabouts since 2015. And you can see here, we took a hit to volume in 2020 when we experienced a construction shutdown for a few months, but we see growth again this year. So far in 2021, we've issued 8,700 permits, and we're on track to issue just a little less than 10,000 by year's end. Construction activity in the city remains strong. When we look at the reported value of construction of the permitted jobs in the city, we see the similar trend. We currently have about $1.2 billion of permitted work in newly issued permits occurring so far in 2021. And we project that we'll get just over the 1.4 billion mark by year's end. So in the last year, PLI has continued to make our permitting processes more transparent and accessible to customers to provide the best level of service to the most amount of people. We've adopted policies and systems to make our code enforcement more efficient and robust. We've adopted internal policies to ensure that our department meets national best practices of building departments. And we have more exciting goals and improvements coming in 2022. We look forward to seeking accreditation as a building department in 2022 through the International Accreditation Services Program. When we look at the program requirements and specifications of accreditation, we find that PLI meets the highest standards in our operations, policies, services, and technical capabilities across the board, and we are ready to prove so through accreditation. We've listened to customer feedback and we've made adjustments to our amendment process effective January 2022 so that customers can pay a nominal fee to switch to a different trade or contractor license holder or change the scope of their job. We listen to customer feedback and are exploring options to have efficient meetings with applicants to review projects with a fair fee to cover those services. We're excited to move into 412 Boulevard of the Allies this spring and to reopen our OneStop PGH counter to our customers in a building that can meet our needs with our sister agencies alongside us. And we are, of course, gearing up to enforce and administer the rental registration program this May 2022 to ensure that renters live in safe housing in the city. So with that, thank you again, Council, for the opportunity to highlight all the good works in PLI in the last year.
Thank you, Director. I think you've definitely shown a few slides that are right up my alley. You show the one with all the permits and all those other graphs you show were nice. Yeah, let's just leave one of the other ones up, maybe in the background. No, I'm kidding. Those additional graphs are great. I want to, before I turn over to council members, I just wanted to, I'll ask my questions at the end, but I just want to say, thank you for all the work that you're doing. I work closely with you on a lot of different things throughout the past couple of years. Just want to thank you for all the effort that you put in as the director, becoming a new mother, managing that. I just want to recognize that because as I watch my wife try and juggle what she's doing with her full-time position, you're right in the same boat. So I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, let's turn it over to members. We're going to start with Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for accommodating me. I appreciate that. I have a phone call in a little bit, but I wanted to talk with you, Director Kinter, and thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do. And I trust the baby's doing well and all is well with you, right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
thank you.
So, first I wanted to ask you this. When we do commercial and residential, do you have two different teams, one that does commercial permits and one that does residential, or is it just a big mishmash?
So we don't have different teams. In order for us to meet the volume, we ensure that all of our plans examiners have the same qualifications so that we have a bigger pool to pull from when we are assigning work.
Sure. And the reason why I ask was I always tell the story when I used to come to town and get permits, I was, in line at the counter, which I like the counter. I'm counting on a counter space at, was it 412?
412. Yep.
412, right. So I really like that person-to-person contact, but I was always the one that get caught behind a guy that's building a skyscraper, and he's rolling out his plans and I'm trying to build a deck. So first and foremost, I want to tell you, the most important thing for me as a director is you're responding to my calls, okay? And you cover that in spades, I got to tell you. There's no director as good as you as far as that goes. And as you know, I have many issues, whether it's my personal issues or constituents. So I really appreciate that. And that to me is the best qualification that you can have. However, there are some issues I have with PLI, as far as, the one stop, I understand, that's easy. It prevents people coming to town. But I find a large amount of people who are just looking to replace a couple of windows or something like that. They just want to go talk to somebody. How much do I owe you? And be out of there. I don't want to lose that personal touch. I've even suggested satellite offices. I would love to have a satellite office in my district where people can just go and get whatever issues they have or would point them in the right direction rather than go through the one stop. Not everybody even has a computer still, believe it or not. So I would love to see that. I talk about it, and I know at the new building, we're still going to have a desk where somebody can come in and see a person.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's important to me. And Also phone calls, I understand through COVID, things were, a little bit different, a little sketchy. However, from your office, I got a lot of calls saying, I can't get anybody to answer the phone. Not once, twice, dozens of times. And even myself, for whether it's Lisa or somebody taking care of my own personal stuff, it's like, we answer the phone from 1 to 2 on 2 days a week, I mean, how much does it cost to have somebody answer the phone? I think people really need to hear a voice at the end of the line. And if you have to walk them through to OneStop or whatever you have to do, it's just that contact. When they get so frustrated when they can't talk to somebody, and we're counting on this OneStop to take care of everybody's solutions, but it doesn't, so I hope we can address that, moving forward. I hope we can have somebody answer the phone consistently. I really do.
Councilman, I appreciate your comments there. So we answer the phone Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 2. We do have a really severe volume of calls. So it doesn't surprise me that someone might not have been able to get through in a timely manner. And that is something that we hope to address when we open the OneStop PGH shop. You're right. A lot of folks just want to come down. They want to talk to someone face to face. They want to get their permit, especially if it's, like you said, a minor alterations permit that you can get same day or next day. The OneStop PGH system is a workflow tool, and it's been helpful in ensuring safe and remote interactions. But you're absolutely right. That's a missing element to not have the counter open. And we are very much looking forward to reopening in 412 Boulevard of the Allies, where we can have PLI, zoning, DOMI, all in one location to resolve development needs as they come in. So absolutely looking forward to that, and hear you loud and clear regarding calls.
Okay, that's good to hear. And hear me out on this, okay? This happened by accident. In my district, and you and I have talked about this many of times, I don't even know how many numbers of properties that are privately owned, but abandoned, okay? Many of these places, we call you and we come out and we cite them. Usually when we cite them, they're in New York somewhere, across the country. They ignore it. They don't take care of the problem. So what we do then is cite them again. And the same, non-productive cycle goes on and on. Now, I stumbled across this. This happened by accident. And this is something I think that we can coordinate with the land bank. And I wanted to talk to, Councilman Wilson about this as well. So again, it's not city-owned properties in my district that I have a major problem with that are abandoned or falling down. It is the privately owned ones. Now, what are the conditions for us to condemn a building? Do they have to be unsafe? Do we have to come out and say, this is not safe? Or is it unsafe just by sitting there with the doors hanging off and the windows open?
A great question. So condemned is a status under the International Property Maintenance Code, and it means unfit for human occupancy. So that can be a range of factors. Usually we're looking at structural factors, but even just not having water service, it means the property is condemnable.
That's good. And let me just tell you about, how I stumbled across this. Okay. So I'm at a community meeting up in Brookline. 30 or so neighbors are there, right? There's a house across the street. It wasn't about this house. We were there on a different subject. But, as I'm walking out, the group of people said, in this house over here, right? It's privately owned. It's been sitting there for 5 years at least. No attention given to it. I think we boarded it up. I guess we have that right to go board it up when the windows are busted or missing. So I had mentioned to those people, and they knew this owner. They had contacts with him. He did live in the area still. He just didn't do anything with it, or wasn't willing to do anything with it. So in talking to these people, I said, well, listen, here's what we'll do. I said, we'll get this condemned. I said, and once it's condemned, then we have the right to tear it down. Correct?
So we reserve the demolition of structures for the most unsafe. And when something is structurally square, we're not putting those on the list to demolish it. Our hope is that we can get those back into productive use, let the land bank know, take some other means.
Right. So let me just tell you, my point is, I agree with you. We don't want to tear down other people's homes and put a lien on the property. Long, messy process. But I will tell you, word got back to this homeowner that Councilman Coghill was going to have a blue sticker slapped on this, and then it is at our purview to tear it down if we so please. Well, you know what? Within a week, it was sold, honest to God. And the neighbors called me, they were thrilled. And the one neighbor in particular said, I called him and I told him that Councilman Coghill is going to have your house torn down. But again, I'm not in the business of trying to tear down all the private properties. We have enough of our own, but this is a serious tool. And I found it to be very effective by accident. When people know they have that property sitting there, you know, it's not going to depreciate. Once the roof falls in, of course, then it's a problem for them. But in order for them to act on it, for us to just be able to have that stick to say, hey, now we can tear this thing down, I believe scares them and they don't want to lose the profit. You know, it really hits them in the pocketbook more than anything. So in working, I think with the land bank and with you, because you're the department that, you know, issues the condemnations, this is a valuable tool I found just in this one instance. And I've been using it out there as well on my own personal levels with people who have houses sitting there. And it's not a threat. It's just the fact that if we deem it unsafe and we put a blue sticker on it, we may knock it down. And then we're going to put a lien on the property for the $60,000 that it takes for us to remove it. So we don't lose any money on it. Of course, we don't get it paid up front on it, but at least we're not going through this chain of citing them, the neighbors calling me, citing them again, then the neighbors calling me. I just feel like we should use this as a tool in some way and let them know that, guess what? Your house has been condemned and it is now under threat to be torn down. And here's what's going to happen when we tear it down. We're going to put a lien on the property. So not only do they lose their structure and they lose at least 2/3 of what that property value is worth, but you know, they're going to have a $60,000 lien on the property once we knock it down. And, you know, I find they act on it or they want to act on it. And they're like, yeah, you know what? We've been sitting on it. We've gotten the citations. They ignore them. But the minute we say we can knock this place down, they move. So I'd like to utilize that as a tool. And I have so many of these, you know, I have more of these than city dilapidated properties. So if you could speak to that. I know.
I mean, I absolutely understand the frustration, and it's frustrating for PLI and inspector staff as well to go through cycles of code enforcement. You know, we are trying to be real about what we can actually demolish given the monies that we have. And, you know, I'd be concerned about throwing out empty threats. But I do understand where you're coming from, and especially where your community is coming from when they see these properties that are sitting, they're abandoned, they're not being taken care of. Sometimes folks, especially neighbors, know who the contact person is, and they've decided that, you know, they're not going to come to court. They're just going to pay a small fine, and they're going to keep going through these code enforcement cycles. So I agree that it's absolutely frustrating, but be happy to talk through with you maybe some other solutions. Especially as the land bank gets up and running. You know, our goal is your goal, which is I want to see this condemned property list get smaller. You know, 1,900 condemned properties is too much. So how do we get this list to be smaller? You know, we got to work with the land bank here to get these back into productive use. So happy to engage with you on that. That's a shared goal, definitely.
Sure. And I do see the land bank being instrumental in this, you know, as to what direction they go, but that's something that needs addressed. So of the $8.7 million in fees that we collect per year, how much of that is residential compared to commercial?
That's a great question. I don't have that off the top, but certainly I can get you those numbers. I think the majority of funds that are coming in are coming from commercial permit fees.
Yeah, I would think so. That's why, you know, and it's, believe me, if it's my business, I'm catering to the people who are paying more money first. That's just the way business works in most times. And those are the bigger projects. And that's where I feel like the person building wanting to put a deck on their house are putting that same lineup. And, you know, obviously it takes a lot longer to process a permit when you're building Mercy Hospital or the new optics or Mercy Hospital than it does for somebody who has a deck. That's why I'd love to see, you know, whether it's satellite office or separated, where you have somebody, you know, taking care of the high end stuff and somebody taking care of the people, the residents who are just trying to get a new window or a deck.
I appreciate the comment. I think, in terms of operational efficiency, we've really tried to make sure all of our staff have the appropriate certifications to handle all applications come in, because we just have such a high volume that we need to be able to assign tasks appropriately. But I appreciate where you're coming from. And I think the reopening of the OneStop PGH counter will help for folks that are just building a deck. They don't have to stand in line behind someone who is doing a commercial permit anymore, because commercial permits don't want to come into the office. They make their drawings online. They're already digital. They're ready to submit them online, and they're into that business process. It really will be the residential customers that will be coming to the counter, because they generally have more questions about the process. Might be the first time they've ever engaged with PLI or got a permit. So we're looking forward to reopening, because I do think it will do just what you're asking, which is focus on those residential customers that want to come into the office, have that person-to-person interface, get their project through the door.
Yep, I can see that. And of the 1,900 condemned properties that we have, just a guesstimation, what would be city-owned and privately owned?
We have over 300 of those are city-owned properties. So majority are privately owned.
Yep, see, which goes back to what I'm saying, to get these people to move on these properties. I'm not saying threat, that's the wrong word. I'm saying put them through the process. And once we put that blue sticker on that house, they are liable to lose that house. And that's the way to move them. Otherwise they just, I think, toss our citations away, especially if they live out of state. And
Yeah, understood. And we have a housing crisis, right? And there's not enough houses, and we have a ton of condemned properties, and, hoping for partners to help connect the dots on those.
right. And to be clear, I'm not looking to tear these privately owned houses down unless they're not acting on them. We give them a certain time span. But many of them could be used for that. I think if we push the right buttons, they will be willing to sell, because they don't want the headaches of us maybe knocking it down. And they don't want to, more importantly, they don't want to lose the money that's invested there, or that they think they're sitting on. You tear the house down, they lose 2/3 of the property. Put a lien on the property for tearing it down, they lose their everything. So that's where we hit them, I believe. I'd love to see it go that way. Councilman Wilson, let's work on the land banking and try to pursue that, because it's a major problem for me, I'll tell you. But that's it for me. Thank you, Director Kinter. I think you're great. I think you do a great job. Other than, these policies and things that I have questions about, I think were implemented long before you, but I know you're doing the best you can, and, look forward to working with you for at least the next 4 years.
Thanks, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. Have you ever used the chat feature?
Chat feature?
Yeah, there's a chat feature. We use it quite frequently. I don't know, some of your residents might like that. It's pretty nice.
To chat?
Yeah. Director, since we're talking about communication, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So, Councilman, if your constituents or public are using the OneStop PGH tool during office hours, there's a little chat box that they can use to talk to an application technician. And we can see what folks are clicking on in OneStop PGH to make sure that they're selecting the right application. If they're having trouble uploading a document, we can help them upload a document to submit the application. It's a really popular tool. We answer, I think it's around 50 chats a day with staff that's very knowledgeable about the permitting process.
It's funny, because now that you bring it up, I have used the chat feature. Not me personally, but people who take care of my permits, honestly, God, they have used the chat. I guess it was a chat feature. They said, I left a message and they got back to me. Or I left a message
That's
and
great.
I got a message, say call back at 2. They actually, through the chat, do they schedule a phone call? Because my person was looking to talk to somebody about something, and they put a thing through the chat and they said you'll get a phone call at 1:00. Is that what you do?
We are answering calls that are coming in and then scheduling calls to go out. So yeah, and it's all the same folks. It's all application technicians that are answering, every point of customer contact that's coming in. So yes, they would do that through chat.
Look at that. I'm more
All right.
technologically advanced than what I even thought I was.
We will keep chatting.
Don't make me boo another one. Okay, that's it for me, Director Kinter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Director, for your presentation. Can you make sure, if you haven't already sent it over to council members, that we all receive that electronically, please?
Yes, Council President, I
Thank
will
you.
do so.
Thank you. And I think that just this conversation about the housing really highlights the need to make sure that we're paying attention when the magistrate seats come up for election. Because we have a lot of people that think that doing nothing is a good answer for being a magistrate. But sometimes you need somebody who's going to actually do something to help benefit residents that are living next to some of these, horrible properties. But I do want to say that I heard your comments about how many permits were issued, and I think that's great. But what I didn't hear you say is how many are pending? What is the wait period typically? Are you seeing similarities with some of the permits that why people may be waiting? Is there some area that maybe people struggle with that maybe we can change or adapt a little bit? Because I have a lot of people complain that the length of time, and almost every time I call Dan Gilman or you about it, it's usually somebody having a difficult time with the process or not following through with information and that kind of stuff. So could you tell me how many are pending and what the average length is for issuing any type of permit in the city?
Yeah, sure. So on the commercial side, we usually, we have that 19-day review period is our average review period. And that's business days. And usually commercial permits are going through about 1 to 1.5 reviews. The second review period being about 7 days. So, it takes about 25 business days to get through a commercial permit. It takes about 15 business days to get through a residential permit. Where we're seeing, I think, pain points is in the first submission, just making sure that people are working with a design professional. Sometimes we see submissions and they say, hey, I'm doing a minor alterations. This doesn't need drawings or a design professional. And then the inspector gets out there and we realize that they're actually changing the use and zoning needs approval, or they're making structural changes. And really this needs to go through a permit review and it needs a design professional. So we've seen those as pain points. And I will say that, there's a barrier to entry to engage in the permitting process. And that's a pain point too. We need a more programmatic approach and assistance connecting folks to design professionals to meet needs of applicants. For small business professionals, they are sometimes surprised at the code requirements and what's required. And they really need to be relying on a design professional to help with the application process. In terms of permits that are currently pending, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I can certainly provide that number to you. That's something we can run a report on. We're issuing or will issue about 10,000 permits, and we have 1,000 more that are going through the review process that might take some time to actually be issued. Other pain points have been exterior factors. So getting contractors lined up has taken some time. Contractors are backed up because supplies and materials are backed up. So there's been sort of a chain reaction where someone will start a permit, they'll be going through the review process, and then it'll pause for quite a long period of time because they're waiting for other items to clear up before they move forward with the project or to decide whether or not to move forward with the project.
Thank you. And then I heard you make, well, there's a couple of points I want to make, is that I'd like to see us coordinate with the magistrate's office, the Housing Opportunity Fund. So when people are coming in there, that we have somebody knowledgeable and giving information about what the city has to offer to help people fix up their homes.
Agreed.
To that, one, they are actually fixing up their homes and their neighbors aren't having to live next to property that's falling apart or dangerous or anything like that. But the other part is to also keep them in their homes to make them safer for them. So I think it'd be great to have those coordinations, those efforts coordinate a little bit better with the magistrates. And I know we've talked about it before for the Housing Opportunity Fund, but I don't know that we've actually implemented something. So I think it would be really great to make sure we're doing that. But I do want to say that I think when we're talking about the permits, I have the Jasmine Nairi campus who's been waiting about a year for a permit. And so, and that she's not unique in my district. I get a lot of phone calls about it. But then she had to hire a professional to come in at, I think, $75,000, which we helped with funding to get this place up and running. And yet we still are waiting for this place. This place could be helping kids. And I'm not even certain at what part the permit process and what she's waiting for at this point, because it has been so time consuming, convoluted, and just very cumbersome for anyone. And I'm thinking, especially when we're doing something with a nonprofit that's doing something in the community, we should have different rules and different guidelines, make it easier, somebody that we assign to work with them to help them do the things that we need them to do in the community. So I just want to put that out there, that's a huge concern to me about, the length of time it takes to get some of these permits for some things that we can almost lose projects over because people can't wait. And they're not all under PL&I. Some of the permits are in different places. I just want to say that that's a huge concern. And I'm going to I'd like to continue to work with everyone on that. But the other thing is, when Councilman Coghill mentioned about the properties that are vacant and falling apart and dilapidated, years ago, this council, we adopted, I think it was Act 90. And we had the right to extradite absentee landlords back to the city of Pittsburgh to face housing court. I have not seen it used. I think one time in all the years was it used. So I don't know what the status is of that and why we're not doing it. If it's the state's law, we're able to do it. We incorporate it into our code. We are able to do it. So any reason to not do it, to me, is unconscionable, because we have the opportunity to do. There's a lot that was included in that. There was a lot of answers, a lot of solutions. And that's why this council voted for it. But yet I don't see it implemented. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, apologies, Councilwoman. I am not too familiar with that, but happy to connect with the law department and see any additional steps that we can take. I would absolutely support the ability to drag folks to the court process. It's a pain point, finding out who they are is a pain point, and getting them to the courts is another one. So if there's a way that we can compel people to come to these criminal matters, then I would absolutely support doing more on that front.
So I'll be honest, I introduced it after I went to a seminar where other cities and other municipalities in Pennsylvania were using it and working well for them. So I made sure I brought it back to council, and council voted easily for it. But I've only heard of one case where it was happening. So, and you were not around then. So I'll be honest, we've never had the opportunity to really talk about it. But I'd love to see us do something more with that, because if it's working other places, I don't know why we're just not doing it here. So thank you, Director, for all your work. I think everyone's looking forward to working with you continually, because in the next few years, because you have done a lot to work with us. So thank you very much. But I like Councilman Coghill, would also like to see us do more in terms of answering the phones around here, not just in this department, but every department. I think people have gotten used to getting a voicemail or just giving up and not following through. They just call 311. And I think that might be okay for some people, but we have a responsibility to the public, and we all have cell phones that we use that the public pays for. And so I'd like to see us once in a while use them and answer them a little bit more often for the public. I feel like that's who we work for. We can't forget that and lose sight of that. And not just this department, but this is true of a lot of the departments around here. I just think that we need to do a little bit better in making sure people are reaching, because that's where the frustration comes in. They can't reach the elected official. They can't reach the department head. They can't even get a receptionist or somebody to answer the phone or to return a phone call. So I think it's frustrating to people. So I'd like to see us all do better, including myself in that area.
Understood. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilperson Strasburger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Kinter, for being here, and for just want to echo what others have said for all that you do and your department does. You all work incredibly hard and have a demanding job that I appreciate your responsiveness. I appreciate just all the work that you do.
Thank you.
The volume of work that you're handling. I wanted to, I think this is a theme that's running through many of our comments. Councilman Coghill, I really agreed with a lot of what he noted and what he suggested around having just a person who can help walk the average person through a project when it comes to construction permitting. And it's great to know about the chat feature. That's something that we can help to disseminate out to the public as they need it, and make sure that it's part of our bag of tools as well. But when I'm thinking about the pain points that you mentioned, there are the people who, like you say, it's maybe their first time interacting with PLI. They're new to this. If they were to do it 3 or 4 or 5 times, they would know exactly kind of what to do and maybe know to hire the design professional. It also strikes me that it's not only PLI who is their first touch, right? Like some people are going first to zoning. Some people are going to maybe DOMI, or there are just many departments that they're interacting with. But I think oftentimes it's PLI who they're interacting with first. So I understand that there's a huge volume of calls, and I wanted to ask you if you were to staff up enough to have the positions available to be able to answer every phone call as it came in, do you have an estimate of how many staff that would take?
That is a great question. I do not have an estimate off the top, but certainly can come in with one. I also think that, again, reopening the counter and having that one-stop, the purpose of the one-stop shop is that regardless of what you're applying for, there's someone to interface with. And reopening the counter is really going to relieve some pain points. But it is true that the volume of chats and emails and calls that are coming in, there's not enough time in the day for application technicians to make sure that we meet our service level agreements to get an application into a queue and answer every customer service inquiry that's coming in. And, frankly, when we are looking at managing that volume, we have an obligation to get those applications into queue, so that will take precedence over answering a phone when we're overburdened. So additional staffing there would help with relief, but I can't give you a number at this time.
And I'd like to see, and I think you're right. I mean, we'll see what happens with the situation with the opening of the in-person counter. And I'd really like to follow up this time next year at this budget hearing to see if we're in the same place. And even before then, to be able to kind of come back on an interim basis and track that, because I would like to provide you with a budget that has the personnel that you need. I think this is one of the largest priorities of this in the city, and I want PLI to have the staff that it needs, both on the inspection end, but also on the application tech end, but also in other parts of divisions of the department as well. In addition, again, this might be solved in part by the opening of the in-person one-stop shop, but it strikes me that some of the pain points aren't with PLI necessarily, but they're with the coordination among different departments. And so if I'm a person who's going through or even a design professional who is maybe new to working with the city and knows what I'm doing, but is new to this process here, if there was a position or two as an ombudsman to be able to hold their hand through the process for the first time throughout the different departments, it might not be PLI's responsibility to do that. I mean, I'm sure your staff do that as well and kind of help to coach them along the process. But if there was someone who kind of represented all those departments that they might touch, okay, now like they could look at the project, they could walk them through the process of all the different steps they're going to have to take. They would say in the front end, it looks like you need to, tweak this, do this, talk to this person first, so that you don't get into a situation where you've submitted a permit, it's incorrect, you have to wait another 15 days or 30 days. And not just for PLI, but for DOMI, if that's necessary, for zoning and planning, if that's necessary. So again, we'll see what happens with this one-stop shop, but I'd really be interested in revisiting that as an idea. Or I'd like to just open it up to you if you've seen best practices from other places, other cities that might be similar to that, but would fit for Pittsburgh. I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Thanks for the question. I think one thing that we've heard when we have conversations with the AIA and MBA, and especially for bigger projects, is an interest in meeting with PLI upfront and having sort of a pre-application meeting. And that's something that we want to get to accommodating with, but we acknowledge that it would pull staff away from, doing other items in their queue. And so we need to have appropriate fees for that type of service. So in this recent fee book that was submitted to council in the last 2 weeks, we did look to adopt a meeting fee to help with this process. And we think that that will help alleviate some pain and help us, to your point, direct folks into the different types of applications that are needed. And on that front, PLI is often, the final gatekeeper, right? So we are the ones that are saying, you need your zoning approval, you need your DOMI approval before you can get this permit in hand. And we often play that role. And these meetings might be an opportunity for us to provide that guidance up front when we have a full understanding of the work scope that someone will be submitting for. So we want to build proper rules around those types of meetings, what documentation would be required at the meeting, understanding of the scope, understanding of the outcomes of the meeting and what would be submitted, so that we can really help to guide folks very early in the process, rather than waiting for the submission to occur and then saying, okay, here's all your revisions to respond to after they've basically worked on a product to submit.
That's great to hear. That sounds like a terrific solution, a meeting fee, and to be able to fund the, position or the staff or the time necessary to be able to, to do that. And again, this time next year, I'll be interested to hear how that goes and to hear some statistics about how often it's utilized and if it grows over the next few years. And, if we need to think about other solutions above and beyond that, but that's great. That's great. I think that could help a lot. Still interested in this idea of an overarching, non-PLI affiliated ombudsman or something like that. But I'll table that idea for now and let you all do your jobs as you are expert at that. I'm really surprised to see on a different topic that we haven't seen that we have 3 additional inspectors for the stormwater portion of the code. I'm surprised to see we don't have additional staff to meet the needs for rental registration. Can you speak to that?
I would say that when the budget was being formulated, there were some items in the court case that were still occurring, but at this point, we've done what the judge has asked. We've adopted a fair fee for rental registration, and we're ready to enforce that in May of 2022. I am worried about having appropriate staffing to meet that volume. The American Community Survey in 2019 said that there were around, I think, 70,000 rental units in the city of Pittsburgh. You saw from my slides, we did about 35,000 inspections last year in the operation unit. So that is a huge increase in volume. And so I am very worried about ensuring that we have appropriate staff to handle rental registration inspections.
Okay, I think you've answered my question there. We'll dig into that a little bit more. And I realize I'm putting you on the spot there, and there might be some things you're able to say due to the court case, and some things you're maybe not able to say. So we'll leave it there for now. I think that, I guess my other question was, of the new inspector positions, or with the new inspector positions, I understand that is, we saw and we voted on this new stormwater code that has to do with commercial and larger construction. Will those positions be flexible enough to accommodate inspections that might go along with other types of stormwater related requirements that aren't necessarily related to this construction code that we just adopted?
That's a great question. So we are setting up that position to gain certification so that they can take on other types of construction inspection work in addition to the stormwater maintenance code. But really for small stormwater nuisance problems, there's a hole in enforcement among the city, the county, and PWSA. And there's really no legislation that addresses those smaller types of nuisance problems. And, you know, at this point, if someone's stormwater is getting into another, from a private parcel is getting into another private parcel, we really say this is, you know, a trespass issue, a civil issue, which is, you know, unsatisfactory on a lot of different fronts. So the stormwater inspector will really be sticking to the stormwater Title 13 enforcement and inspection. And there's also in that code a requirement to do this post-construction inspection on a 1, 3, and 5 year scale of stuff, developments that have already been built. So I think they're going to have their hands full with stormwater, but they'll also have some certifications to pick up on energy and accessibility and other types of building code requirements in other permits.
Okay, great. And so, and then, you know, obviously, or not obviously, but I would assume that for other types of stormwater inspections, so the, you know, the odd rain garden that someone installs in their front yard, that's not sort of building code related, although it is code related. I mean, that's just something we're going to have to figure out among all the different entities that could be inspecting, right, for the like efficacy of this, of the stormwater capture treatment.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if someone was to install a rainwater on a private parcel that's, you know, under this 10,000 square feet threshold of the stormwater code, PLI wouldn't be reviewing or inspecting for that. PWSA would care about the flows into their utility system. But at this time, PLI would not require a permit, inspect or enforce, you know, aspects of a rain garden.
Okay. Thank you. That was really helpful. I appreciate, again, everything you do, and I appreciate your time today. So I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson. We'll go to Councilperson Gross.
There it goes. Hello. Hello, Director. Good to see you as always. So this has already been a lengthy discussion, but I do want to just highlight a couple of things that have been said, but to put, you know, to emphasize, we talked about, I think I'm surprised that for years now, we haven't seen an increase in personnel in your department. And I've been saying this every year, even before you were a director. Really, the employment in the department has stayed flat while permits have just skyrocketed. So you made a good presentation today. And again, forgive me from switching from Zoom screen to Zoom screen. I'll try to stay on this one. So it looks like I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you in both places, but that you have increased tremendously in the 8 years that I've been on council at PLI, the number of permits that are applied for. People 10 years ago weren't building buildings. And we are just, as you pointed out, I think very effectively by the number of permits and by the dollars of new construction, the value of the new construction. It's been a tremendous amount of construction activity that you all are keeping up with. And I am in favor of adding personnel to your department. And I did fail to do so, but attempted to do so last year during budget season. And additionally, the level of inspections that are increasing, we really appreciate that work. That is incredibly valuable work. We know that that is part of the problem with the safety and livability of conditions that are especially our poorest neighbors are facing. You see it in the headlines. We have repeated problems with unlivable conditions in housing units, and with that you have and city council and the mayor's office has put years now into asserting our jurisdiction to doing those inspections. We are eager to see those start, and I appreciate it, but that needs to be staffed. And just a word of thanks also for putting in more than a year now of work with the coalition of council members and Let's Say Allegheny to trying to figure out how to do, in addition, lead inspections to protect our children against lead poisoning. But having said that, I also want to add capacity to your department because I do think we are still not serving both our small property owners, residential property owners, but our small business operators. And I've said this to you privately. I've said it, for years, and I really appreciate your willingness to talk about it. My district has at least as many, if not the most, small businesses of any of the 9 council districts. And it is one of my biggest complaints. So I have a business owner now, small woman-owned business. I have many, many women-owned businesses in my district, bricks and mortar retail. In the time it took for her to get work done in her shop and to try to pass inspection, the contractor's license expired. And the way it's told to me, that meant that the case had to be restarted under a new contractor number. And so it zeroed out, and she's being told this week that the inspectors are now trying to require her to rip her walls open again, even though wiring was approved and HVAC was approved and closed, and that was last year. They're trying to assert the need to re-inspect. So there are still cases like this, that when you are a big out-of-town developer and you have a star architect and 3 attorneys and a variety of engineers on your team, you don't have those problems. So yes, we've talked about ombudsmans before. We've talked about the fact that it's unfortunate that city council staff have to perform that function. It's one of our core constituent cases in my office. So it's not just residential, it's not just new construction and all the hazards that come with that, and the community meetings and the amount of community work that goes into that. Small business complaints are a solid third of the casework in my council office. And I think that is embedded, and I've said this to you before, so I'm just saying it publicly now. I think when we talk about systemic discrimination, systemic inequity, that's the way we collectively have built our system. That it's easy to get through if you're a huge developer with lots of resources. And it's difficult to get through if you're basically anyone else. And that we can do better than that. And that is decisions that we need to make here in budgeting and resourcing to level that playing field and to uplift our own citizens who are investing in their own properties, trying to stay in their own homes or trying to improve their own businesses. Because we know, at least I believe, that is where our wealth and power come from, is from investing in our own communities. And we heard that. I think it's part of, I want to say this too, and to the record while you're here, even though I'm not asking you a question, I want to say that PLI, not only PLI, but also city planning and also Parks and Rec and also DPW are the kinds of investments that I heard people protesting for 6 months last year, that they want investments in community. And that means safe housing. We need PLI for that. Does that mean new affordable housing? We need PLI for that. Does that mean locally owned businesses? We need PLI for that. So does that mean, doing the regulatory work so that we don't have landlords abusing tenants? We need PLI for that. So I believe that your work is critically important for the call to action that we've heard from for reinvesting in communities, reinvesting in our own people, reinvesting in Pittsburgh neighborhoods. So I just want to say that I do want to see more positions that can do that casework for people who don't have, like Councilman Smith's organization that is a nonprofit that's trying to provide social services that doesn't have really the $70,000 to spend on a design professional. Sometimes it's merely parking pads. We had to work with a whole street in Lawrenceville that all got cited on the same day for needing occupancy permits for parking pads. And one of the residents of the same alley would have been forced to get site plans and pay for that. So that was, before your time. It was many years ago now, but that we are holding our citizens up to standards without supporting them to meet those standards. So thank you for nodding your head and agreeing. And I know that your work has brought us all a long way towards getting to the place I'm trying to get us to. You have a really strong functioning department. Your capacity has increased tremendously with just the same number of employees, which is remarkable. And I'd like to see us that really meet the needs that are unmet for, again, the people who are trying to improve their own communities. I do want to point out, if Mr. Chair, I'm almost finished, that I really like the slide where you showed the value of properties in new construction. Just rough balling, you showed in the last 3 years over $1 billion each year. I kind of put a kind of rough number of about $4 billion in the last 3 years in new construction. And you don't have anything to do with the property taxes being collected on those properties. But at the 8 mills that we should be collecting off of those now constructed properties worth $4 billion, we should have seen an additional $32 million in property and real estate tax, and we haven't. So thank you for sharing that information. And it's going to be, I think, really useful in our conversations with other departments about how we are or are not valuing properties and accurately collecting the taxes that the residents deserve from those properties. So I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I guess it's my turn.
It is. I'm sorry I have to leave.
No problem. Just wanted to ask you a question. We keep talking about the amount of workers. What is the hourly wage that we pay for our current workers? What is the lowest amount that we pay?
The lowest. So we have series of different job specs in PLI. We have
Do we go below $20 an hour somewhere?
we do, yeah. Our clerical staff receive less than $20 an hour. I would have to do a double check on some other staffing as well, but I believe there may be one other job spec that's under that amount.
Yeah, this isn't anything against you. I guess I'm just, we've had conversations about different positions and how workers should be, maybe paid more. Some workers can't collect overtime. So anyway, just a conversation of just how much we pay in the city, just in general, to all of our workers. I'll probably start asking that question more often. All right, so I want to ask, it's been brought up a couple of different ways here, but I just want to speak directly to it. There's a lot of businesses in the city of Pittsburgh that don't have an occupancy permit. Or I'm sorry, I'll let you say the official language. What is that?
A certificate of occupancy for the building?
Yeah, certificate of occupancy. And so I think there's some conversation going on here, and I think it's been going on for some years about, really the assistance for them to get that, but that's not PLI's responsibility. I think a lot of people forget that, like, PLI is literally, you review, you tell that architect that they've hired, whether or not they've, met the goals of retaining that ARC. Where would you place, if we did have an architect somewhere that we paid small businesses, or that we, offer to small businesses to work with PLI, where would you house that? URA?
That's a great question. I don't want, to throw something on another agency, but it would be great to have, a program where there is a very knowledgeable concierge of sorts who could connect a customer or an applicant to an architect that is relevant to what they're trying to build. So if it's a residential deck, an architect or a design professional that has experience with that, or if it's a commercial building, that's more complicated, a design professional that has experience to that. I'm not sure if the URA would be game for something like that, but I think that would be a wonderful partnership to have and really connect resources, because I agree with council members. It is absolutely a barrier to entry for our permit applicants, and we just want to see safe structures, and connecting folks with design professionals is a way to get there. So would absolutely support a program that looks like that.
Right, because it's like, as you get better, and as you as PLI continue to increase enforcement, increase staff to handle reviews, it still doesn't, you're not the entity where that would be housed. So I just think we need to, start thinking, if we are going to entertain hiring like a architect at the city or at the URA, just where that person lies. The meeting fee that you brought up in terms of the scheduling, the fees that were sent over for the budget, where can you explain that fee? Because I know we've discussed before about, for these larger, whether it's a skyscraper or a residential unit, multi-residential unit, that there would be, an option to have, for that developer or that, project manager to pay, or the architect to pay a pre-planning meeting fee. And there was something in place, but is this what you're talking about?
Yes, this is actually something that's a little bit new in our fee schedule that we proposed in front of council for 2022. I apologize, I don't have the dollar amount in front of me, but it would be a fee to cover the costs of having a pre-application meeting with PLI prior to submitting. Now, we recognize that would be pulling staff away from what would ordinarily be in their to-do list. So the fee really covers the time and the cost of holding that meeting. And we also want to build really clear parameters around what that meeting is for and what would be accomplished. So prior to coming to that meeting, we want to have parameters about what we would expect participants to bring to the meeting, so that we can have a fruitful discussion and be able to provide appropriate direction for submission of an application thereafter.
Okay. So will this get at the large developer that?
Yeah, this
It's
is
not-
really geared towards larger developments and complicated developments. If someone who is building a helipad, right? There's not too many of those in the cities. That's something that sometimes folks want to reach out and get some guidance so that they're creating construction drawings that they can get through the process and don't have to be subjected to too many resubmissions. So yeah, this is really geared towards bigger projects, but we also want to use this as an opportunity to think about how we can help the smaller projects that are a little bit more clear cut. And council talked about that a little bit today. Again, I think reopening the OneStop PGH shop will be more helpful for those smaller residential projects. And the meetings are really for the bigger commercial complex projects, and they're complex because of the construction codes that are being applied to the project.
Okay, thanks. This stormwater, the stormwater inspectors that are being added, is this because of the change to the code of structures that are above X amount of square feet that require to hold more water on site?
Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting, because this is the exact example I give as to why I'm opposed to the bill to take away from the planning commission and from I don't want the responsibility of knowing whether or not they're holding the amount of correct gallons on site, and the release of the time that they have to release that into our system. So there's you might have seen there's this bill that tries to strip some of those powers and give it to council, but you're actually hiring those positions, the example that I give.
So
we can see how much of a big undertaking this is going to be. Can you explain that?
So this Title 13 stormwater ordinance ensures that the city meets its permit obligations, stormwater permit obligations under the EPA. And part of that is reviewing large scale stormwater systems that are built. It's over 10,000 square feet. So what PLI would be doing is reviewing what's actually being constructed on site, ensuring that it's safe construction, that it's going to be able to meet the maintenance requirements that are required thereafter, and so that the flows of water that go into the utility system are appropriate. We also are obligated under that stormwater Title 13 code to do post-construction inspections 1, 3, and 5 years after the installation of that system to ensure that it's still meeting standards. And so the stormwater inspector is really going to be inspecting those aspects of the code in order to appropriately enforce Title 13, issue violations when those developments are out of compliance, and get them back into compliance by going and getting a stormwater permit to meet those Title 13 requirements so that the city can meet its stormwater permit requirement.
There's a zoning requirement that too, right?
It is connected to zoning requirements. Zoning will do conceptual reviews of the best management practices of the stormwater system that's being adopted. And PLI will ensure that whatever was approved by zoning, just as we do now with anything else, is actually what is happening in the field when it is installed.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want any part of that decision. I'd rather vote on what I agree, what council agrees with, or to incorporate into our code, and it's being handled from that point. So I wanted to ask you about the lead safety bill. I know there was let's just start with the 70,000 rental unit number. So we would cover 70,000 rental units?
So the American Community Survey estimates that there's about 70,000 rental units in the city of Pittsburgh, and those would be covered under the rental registration ordinance that we plan on enforcing May of 2022. In relation to the lead safe ordinance, the last version of the bill I saw looks to adopt lead inspections in rental units. So the portion of those that are pre-1978 would not be all 70,000, but it would be a large portion, just given the state and age of our infrastructure. I think the estimate is like 80% of that 70,000.
So 80% is 70,000. Does that organization give an estimate how many the average child per unit? Is that one?
That I'm not aware of.
I'm interested in that number. The impact that this could have is phenomenal, I think. Just starting there, and all we can learn from what the inspection we would do with the rental unit and the what would be incorporated in terms of the lead inspection at those units. Do you agree? Or like with this?
That is a huge volume of inspections. And, when we look at, I've listened to the Lead Safe Coalition and some of the experts that they've brought in and the data that they've provided. And when you look at the data, kids are getting lead poisoning in places where there is a lack of property maintenance upkeep in the city. And so the rental registration ordinance is just that, to ensure that those basic property maintenance standards of the code are met. And so it directly connects to lead safety.
How many more inspectors would you need to make that the most effective program?
That is a great question. I think we did, some back of the envelope estimates, and then more sophisticated ones later on. And I believe the just for lead, discount or putting rental aside, an additional 4 inspectors would be necessary.
So additional
giving
4
100
on the budget we see, an additional 4, and that would need to be in place by May.
So 4 is in regards to hours devoted to lead. I'm not sure we've done a more recent calculation just for rental registration, and that is what would be going into effect in May. So apologies, I could follow up regarding those numbers.
Yeah, can you please follow up? Just bring this up also just to see how we would negotiate this with the ARP dollars that were set aside in terms of how we draw that down, put that into operating, if that's where we're going to do that.
Sure, understood.
And I want to thank you for working with us on all of these meetings that we've really tried to dial in. I have to give you and also Councilperson Strasburger, the credit there where it's due, because people, have been working nonstop on this bill. So my last comment isn't a question. I mean, it's a comment, not a question. But I just want to say that I've been on the phone and I've pulled you into many conversations where, the public is quite irate with PLI, and I have to say that you've kept a complete professional composure during those conversations, and it just speaks to the level of frustration that the public feels. And it's just like, I definitely hear the concerns of we need to have, more people to answer phones and everything. But I just think that, I just keep trying to think about your department in terms of the workers that are there. I know we work closely on different issues, and I'm bringing up someone that's being disrespectful on the phone. It's just, it's just an unfortunate situation sometimes where some of these places just need a better architect. They just need to get someone more professionally trained on what our system is requiring. That's just a fact of the matter. I'm not sure, how we get to a place where everyone that calls in has, everything in order. Obviously there's an equity issue there. And that's why I was asking the questions around, where does that person who would, possibly be like a on-call architect for a small business, where that lies. So I'm definitely interested in that conversation, but I just wanted to take this moment to thank you for, being a great public servant to the city of Pittsburgh.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Anyone have any other questions? All right. This budget hearing is adjourned. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just real quick.
I have to mention, I failed to mention one thing. It is not adjourned. I don't think I have to take that back, but I need to mention that we will continue with this recess. The next budget hearing is Friday, November 19th. No, that's open.
Tuesday.
November 23rd, we will have the Pittsburgh Housing Authority, Pittsburgh Parking Authority, the Sports and Exhibition Stadium Authority at 10 a.m. And then at 1:30, we will have Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, Alcoasand. All right. Until then, we are in recess.